Welcome back, Dad, to the podcast. And today I just want to start with a question. And it's, have you ever felt like an outsider? I think we both have. Too far away from God to receive his favor. You know, it sometimes seems like in this world, it's a good old boys club in which only those who are well connected get noticed and are approved to do certain things. So what happens when you're on the outside of that club? And sometimes we feel like that, I think, as Christians. And in today's episode, we're going to look at a Gentile woman. And you have to stop and pause with those two words, Gentile woman, because that makes her an outsider, especially to the Jewish Messiah. And we're going to see her little daughter is being tortured by a demon, so she runs to Jesus. Yet Jesus at first seems to ignore her request. It's a very interesting, a lot's going on here. So Jesus is going to test this woman to reveal her faith. And I believe this historical event isn't just about healing or Jesus's power over demons. I believe that it shows his heart for the Gentiles, that he's not just a Jewish God. And it also, I think, invites us to ask the question, do I pursue God's grace despite my low status? So the good news in today's podcast is that in this clash of cultures between the Jew and Gentile, Jesus will demonstrate that a person without any status, any connections, those who seem to be on the outside, can still receive God's favor and grace. So I think it's a very encouraging one for us today. This is episode 69 in the Jesus Said That series, looking at every word Jesus spoke in the New Testament. Today's episode is titled Seeking Crumbs of Grace, the woman who had nothing but faith, from Matthew 15 and Mark 7.
I'd like to welcome Pastor Kenny, the initiator of all of this. He's the one who does all the coordination, trying to get the timelines together, sends me a set of notes, and he does great work. And oftentimes I just pull out my notes and start to look at the details since I've preached through the four Gospels. But this was a text that I preached on Mother's Day several times, I noticed.
I remember.
Because when you said Gentile woman, first century women had basically no rights, as many don't around the world today. And being a Gentile, you're an outsider to Israel. So it's a great text for those who feel disenfranchised. Your term, good old boys network, women don't feel like they're part. So this is a beautiful text of a woman of faith.
I'm looking forward to it, as I always say, because it's always fun looking at the text. Anything you want to share personally before we get started here? Because it's a shorter text today. It should be a text that is very straightforward, very encouraging. A little perplexing at times, but anything you want to share with us personally?
Just that the album's coming out tomorrow.
Yep,
very excited.
Album.
You know, proud father here, Shamrock Preacher Man. I encourage everyone to take some time and put in your order. You can order early, or you can wait till tomorrow if you will. Tremendous words on the life of St. Patrick, challenging to all. You and I, we are in an ethnically diverse area. We minister to all kinds of people. Rarely is our focus on white people or the origin or even of the Irish. So it's kind of fun for us to step back and then look at our own culture, so to speak. And it's a challenge. I mean, that man had just such great faith that your life is inspired by it. So excited about the release. And can't wait. I've been enjoying early songs, and they're awesome. The grandchildren love them, by the way. So just want to encourage everybody. So it's exciting for me.
And I'll put the link in the description below. And I've made lyric videos using a lot of imagery because it really makes you think some of the areas that he went to.
Yeah.
You're dealing with Celtic warlords. You're dealing with some rough people. Given the gospel, wizards, witches. So I'll put the link in that. That's all free on YouTube. You can listen to it all free. It's on Spotify, all those places. People can listen free if they want. I do appreciate they buy the album, a whole $7. So it's I made it almost as cheap as possible just to get it out there. So I'm looking forward to that. I know I've been struggling with my health. We had a very good VBS, and then I got COVID, and then at the end of COVID, I got pink eye, and then after pink eye, I got the stomach flu, and it was a really rough 2 weeks there.
If you're my favorite horse, I'd probably take you out and shot you, right? Yeah.
It was pretty rough, but I'm glad to be feeling good and back to our Bible studies. So I guess we'll jump right into it. So in our last podcast 68, Jesus confronted the Pharisees because they originally confronted him, and then he reversed it on them. And he declared that real defilement comes from within the heart, not from keeping religious man-made rituals, not just doing certain laws and then that makes you a good person. It's really how you act towards God from your inner man. So now Jesus retreats into Gentile territory, the region of Tyre and Sidon, where he's going to meet a Syrophoenician woman. And this woman really has no claim to Israel's promises. She is an outsider. And it kind of reminds me of a couple women from the Bible, Rahab, who was a Canaanite woman. That's how actually Matthew's going to define this woman, Canaanite. It wasn't a complimentary term if you were a Canaanite, because you were those people who Joshua had to remove. So there's a lot of tensions there. And also Ruth, a Moabite who joined Israel through faith. And both of these women became part of the Israel nation and were in the line of Jesus's birth. So that's kind of cool. And I think it's kind of a foreshadow of God bringing the Gentiles into the fold here. Now, for people who don't understand, I think it's important to know that Gentiles were always invited to join the Jewish faith. However, they didn't have all the rights and privileges. You couldn't go as far in the temple. You would be saved and all that stuff, but there was restrictions where that's why after Jesus started the church, it was something kind of revolutionary. I could tell you were going to say something.
When I took a leadership class at Dallas Seminary, Dr. Bill Lawrence walked us through the Gospel of Mark, and I remember his term so well. She was a double dip Gentile, and it just stuck out in my mind because she's Syrian, she's Phoenician. I mean, she's fully outside the loop in so many ways. And then here in Matthew, a Canaanite. I mean, if that doesn't peg at all. So if you feel like you're, again, an outsider, this text should encourage you greatly.
And why is he going through this area? Well, we were told in John 7:1 from last podcast that he was staying out of Judea by Jerusalem, that region, because the religious community was trying to kill him. So he's going to, interesting word, retreat into Tyre and Sidon. Seems probably for a rest. Mm-hmm. And the Father is going to use him at this time. So if you have your Bibles, we're in Matthew chapter 15. We're picking right up where we left off from last study. So this is 15:21 through 28. Like I said, it's a pretty straightforward passage, so I think we can learn a lot from this. When Jesus left there, he withdrew to the area of Tyre and Sidon. So Jesus confronts the Pharisees. Jesus leaves Galilee. He travels to Tyre and Sidon, which were coastal cities, and I believe that's in Lebanon today. So these cities were melting pots. They were a place of trade between Phoenicians, Greeks, and Roman cultures, and obviously Jewish culture too. And there were many pagan temples, along with a few synagogues. And it's possible that the synagogues there is where this woman maybe heard about the Messiah, because she clearly knows who Jesus is. Maybe she actually saw him do miracles. We don't know. I mean, back then people could travel too. So it's not like they were stuck in their little town. So these cities were historically linked to Israel's enemies, such as Jezebel. Not a great person, came from that area. So for a Jewish rabbi to deliberately travel there was kind of unheard of. It wasn't normal. Usually you would travel in Israel. Now, as I pointed out, Matthew uses the word withdrew, which seems to indicate he wants some privacy or rest after a lot of ministry and a lot of opposition. Yet here it seems like his fame precedes him because this woman comes and seeks him out. And that could even be why the apostles are like, get rid of this woman, because it's like, we're trying to get on a vacation and this woman is just bothering us.
And they think she's unclean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Such a strong term, but I mean, they're in Gentile land. This is, I believe, the only account where Jesus goes outside of what we call Israel proper. He's definitely in Gentile domain. But speaking of the word unclean, we have great theology being introduced, because in 15:11, Jesus says, not what goes into the mouth defiles a man, but what comes out of the mouth, this defiles a man. So we learn later on, of course, with Peter in Acts 10, that there are no foods unclean. Well, Jesus states that, but we're going to find out there are no people that are unclean too, because Jesus died for them. And that's the point of Acts chapter 10. So you have great theology, but you get a hint of what's coming with the church age.
And I just encourage people, even today, if you feel like an outsider, even as a Christian, if you feel like an outsider, because there are a lot of good old boy clubs networks and they want you to play to their rules, just to know that you are a part with Christ. Obviously, you should be a part of a church. I'm not saying that. Be a part of a church, be involved, worship. But don't think you have to have status to receive more grace or have done anything great. Because that's what the Pharisees thought, and they were rejected, where this woman came in faith. So right then it says, just then, very interesting statement, a Canaanite woman from that region came, and notice kept crying out, have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is severely tormented by a demon. Now that's oddly specific. That she just kind of knows there's a demon, and everything in that statement shows a woman who really knows what's going on. She calls him Lord, Son of David, messianic title, and understood demon possession.
The irony, you had the scribes and Pharisees who are upset, it's guilt by association. The disciples don't wash their hands in the prescribed tradition of the elders, and they walk away from Jesus, and this woman is coming to him. So I love the contrast in the text in both Matthew 15 and Mark 7, because you got the people who should have known to be drawn to Jesus leaving him, and then somebody who probably shouldn't understand coming to him.
So unlike the Pharisees, she's an outsider, ethnically, religiously, socially, yet she approaches Jesus. And also, it should be pointed out, in the Greco-Roman culture, Roman women rarely approached male leaders, especially Jewish male leaders. So she's showing she's desperate. She's appealing. That's why she keeps crying, have mercy on me. And this is really recognizing from 2 Samuel 7:12 through 16, Israel's promised king, So the question is, and I think a lot of people say, how did this woman know so much? And once again, they didn't just stay in their regions and never travel. So it's very possible she could have seen Jesus. Jesus was extremely popular at this time now. Even it seems like the royalty, Herod and all of them knew all about him. They were interested in Jesus. I would assume Rome was interested to a degree. And maybe she heard him teaching. Maybe when the apostles went out, she could have been visiting a place, heard, or people talk. That hasn't changed.
Right.
So she knows about Jesus's power. Now, her daughter's condition was really bad. And it said tormented by a demon. So it's much more than just a physical ailment. And I have to be careful how I say this, but it seems like demon possession in the biblical always affects the physical or mental. That's how it manifests itself. Now, I say I want to be careful because I don't want to say all physical or mental affliction is demonic, because there's some people who go crazy, everything's a demon. But biblically, when demons attack people, it tends to be a physical or mental stuff is going on. So somehow this woman identifies this. And it shows she kept crying out. So here she is crying out for mercy. And this is where it gets interesting, but he did not answer her at all. So he's just ignoring her, just keeps on walking. And his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away, because she's crying out after us." So Jesus' silence is kind of surprising, maybe even jarring. And the question is, why doesn't he respond? And, text doesn't say, but my thoughts would be, which, are just my thoughts, but it was probably deliberate pause. He's probably waiting. He's probably seeing how she's going to act, see how his disciples react, and make it a teachable moment, because he knows what he's going to do.
There's a word that we're subject to, and that God is in his time. And what's honestly the one thing we don't enjoy? Waiting. And in Mark 4, Jesus is with the disciples in a boat. The storm comes because he had taught them. He's testing them. It's a test. And how long did he permit the storm to go on? It's a test. Same thing in chapter 6 of Mark. They are in the storm. Jesus is up praying for them, and they're straining at rowing. How long did he leave them out there? Again, he knows exactly how long, and he's given pause here because to see how desperate the woman is to keep coming to him. And I always turn to Isaiah 64:4, where it says, "Who acts for the one who waits." So when you hear the word waits, think time. Waits for him. So this is a test, and it's always a prescribed period. I tell people, just keep pursuing them, even in the midst of the test, even as you're waiting, and keep doing what you were last assigned to do by God.
And it's a sign of maturity is waiting. I know my children, my youngest one, have no patience. The 3-year-old will sit down at the table, start yelling for his applesauce or whatever. And it's like, no, you have to wait. You have to be patient. You need to say please. And it's something I think that has to be learned. So I think he's also allowing cultural assumptions to kind of boil up to see how the disciples are going to react. And they don't react very well. They say, "Send her away." Maybe they're irritated. Maybe it's prejudice. Maybe they think they're protecting Jesus, who's coming away from arrest. Who knows? But she's giving these loud, emotional pleas. And I know when people are emotional on the street, it's very discomforting. If you've ever been, at a funeral or even out on the street and someone's sad and they're weeping and wailing, it's a very uncomfortable feeling. So it could just be the whole comfort here. And it kind of reminds me of how the apostles in our last podcast were afraid of offending the Pharisees. And it showed they were more focused on comfort at that point because they felt uncomfortable that Jesus had offended the religious. And I think Jesus is going to say, you know what? He's going to actually step in and do something in this situation. So he replies finally to this woman, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." So it's a very exclusive statement, and it's his mission. Jesus was Jewish, and he was sent to preach the kingdom to his people. And I believe the lost sheep here refers to the Jewish people who are moving away from God's covenant, and they need their shepherd, Jeremiah 50, verse 6. So, and then we have to remember this isn't Jesus's final word. It's part of a dialogue. It's part of a bigger context, which I think in his rabbinic nature as a rabbi, he's just kind of probing, questioning, and seeing how people respond.
But there always needs to be a plan.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think people go, "I want to reach the world." Well, where do you start? And Jesus always had a plan. We go to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and when you listen to that, what is it? It's all beginning with the Jews, then on to the Samaritans, half-Jews, to the uttermost part of the earth. Paul says same thing, Romans 16. He's not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for his power of God and salvation to everyone who believes, but to the Jew first. So you have to have a plan of attack, and I think that comes out because he had to come and offer the kingdom, because that's what he was to fulfill according to Old Testament prophecy. But there's a plan, but you're exactly right, and I love it. Just the interplay and the interaction as a rabbi, the questions and the back and the forth. There's a lot that goes on here.
So he will include the Gentiles, but at this point, that wasn't his focus. His focus was his people. But she came, so it seems like she's been kind of yelling behind them, not approaching. But now she comes, kneels before him, and says, Lord, help me. So this woman presses forward, kneels, it's humility, calls him Lord, and it shows her trust. So this really defies social norms. Mm-hmm. And this woman, an outsider, really kind of shows up, I would say, the Pharisees and many of the people who didn't acknowledge who Jesus was.
You got to take the acronym ASK, Matthew 7 through 11, ask, seek, knock. All three are imperatives, commands, but they're probably iteratives. In other words, keep on asking, keep on seeking, keep on knocking. She's determined, and God always honors the people that are determined to keep coming back to him. And just love the example here that she gives for all of us.
So then Jesus, if this was recorded, people would be very offended by him, responds and says, it isn't right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. Now, commentaries take this many different ways. Some say that Jesus is just using the dog, which was a derogatory term for Gentiles, which I think could be very true, because they were unclean. So, don't think of your little Fifi, your pet, think of a scavenger. I remember when we were in Honduras, they had a lot of those dogs. Mm-hmm. Scary, skinny, just needed food, and they were just out everywhere looking for whatever. Or I've heard some commentators say it could have been like, as in a household pet, but I don't really think that's what Jesus is saying here. I think he's really just saying you're a Gentile, And I think, again, it's testing her. He's going to see how she's going to respond to basically a slur in their mindset of being unclean. So I think the imagery here is the children are Israel, and the bread is God's covenant blessing, his grace. And his tone is very firm, and yet, in a sense, he's just seeing how is she going to respond, and what will others think when they see it. And she has a masterful response. She said, yes, Lord. She's not offended. Yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. So she doesn't argue or take offense that she's called a dog. Most women would say, I'm not taking that. I'm out of here. I'm an independent woman. Mm-hmm. But she accepts Jesus' metaphor and turns it into a plea for grace. So she understands she's an outsider. She's unclean. She's a dog. But she says that even the crumbs of Jesus' power is enough to heal her daughter. And, I think this is kind of profound because she recognizes Jesus' authority and believes his mercy extends beyond Israel.
You've got to wrap yourself with humility. It's hard for all of us. She recognizes who she is and she has no right, but at the same time, she humbles herself. She breaks cultural norms, goes to a rabbi, makes her plea, keeps pleading, even despite the disciples of Jesus being uncomfortable. But you wrap yourself with humility. If you truly believe you deserve nothing, then you have no pride at that point. And that's the whole progression in Matthew 5. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the mourn, but blessed are the meek, right? So I think we see those traits in this woman, and God honors her.
So she's not asking for Israel's portion, just a part of blessing. Then Jesus replies to her, woman, your faith is great. Let it be done for you as you want. And from that hour, her daughter was healed. So from what I understand, Jesus only used this, your faith is great, twice. And that was this woman and the centurion just saying, wow, that's quite a compliment from Jesus. Because usually it's your faith is little. Yeah. And her humility, her persistence really just revealed Jesus's heart in the sense that he granted her favor. And it's interesting how the whole demon possession part isn't even a major part of this. It's just like the demon's gone. Yeah. He's here, you're healed, and that's not even a problem. It's like demon's gone. So I want those listening today to know that faith, not status, unlocks God's blessing. Important. So faith, not status. It foreshadows the Great Commission and the gospel spread. So this woman's faith, I think, really probably challenged disciples to see God's grace as boundless and it's available to everybody. So it really shook up cultural norms.
Jesus was no respecter of persons, and we need to imitate that. James blasts his disciples in his letter for showing preference to certain people over others, and we see that Jesus doesn't do that.
Respecters of persons, the older I get, the less I respect persons I become. Like you just like see Twitter and there's all these parts of Christianity that, well, if he said it, then it must be true. Or if he does it, I agree with him. And it's like, who are these people? You know, so now we're going to get to Mark's account, which is going to add some more information. So stick around for this because it's some interesting little tidbits Mark gives, but it's pretty quick because Mark is just boom, boom, boom. So here he is in Mark 7:24 through 30. And it says, he got up and departed from there to the region of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, but he could not escape notice. So here he is. And as I've said it a million times, we believe Mark is from Peter's perspective. So here's information he knows. So they go into some house and they want privacy. And one thing I just wanted to point out for past podcasts and future is a lot of times when it says a house, people always try to say that's like Peter's house or whatever. But we see that the house, that can be a more generic term because I don't think he had a house in Tyre, or I would highly doubt.
Right.
So just a side note where I've heard people say whenever it says the house, it's always Peter's. It's like, I would disagree with that.
Would you walk 40 miles for a vacation? I mean, that's how far they go to Tyre. I mean, that just comes to mind. I'm going, wow. They really wanted to get away from the scribes and Pharisees.
So here they are. There's so much fame he has at this point. He's fed the 5,000, walked on water, healed the list goes on and on and on. So this verse kind of sets up tension once again. Jesus is seeking solitude, but this woman seeks him out. All right. So it says, instead, immediately after hearing about him, a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit came and fell at his feet. So here's Mark's favorite word, immediately. It's going boom, boom, boom. So here she is. She comes quickly. She shows worship and reverence. And little daughter kind of adds, I think, a personal note, especially with parents. When you hear little daughter, you would have a lot more compassion. Because you see how little kids are so helpless, and I can't imagine if your little kid had a demon in him, how horrible that must be as a parent. So an interesting fact I want to draw out that we didn't look at earlier because we try to save tidbits through the podcast is that in this culture, there was a lot of these cultures believed in demonic possession, but they would usually go to exorcist or pagan rituals to try to fix or cast out the demons. So it's kind of interesting that this woman chose to seek Jesus, not local deities. And I think that shows her faith in the Jewish God, because she didn't say, oh, I'll go to my local temple, or at least that's not in the text. It seems like she just goes to Jesus. Now, this is where Mark will give us a lot more information. Remember, Matthew just said she was a Gentile. Mark's going to build upon it. This woman was a Gentile, a Syrophoenician by birth. And she kept asking him to cast the demon out of her daughter. All right. So keeps talking, keeps saying. So this mirrors Matthew's kept crying out. And it kind of reminded me when I was studying this of Jacob when he wrestled with the angel of the Lord. I would say that was probably Christ pre-incarnate. And it was just God's way of testing Jacob. He's trying to walk away. Jacob grabs him, says, I won't let you go, bless me. And they fight all night. That kind of reminds me of this woman. It's just constant. It's kind of constant peppering of, please heal my child. Please heal my child. Any comments before
Keep rolling, please.
So he said to her, let the children be fed first, because it isn't right to take the children's bread and throws it to the dogs. Now, Mark adds a little bit more clarity where he says first, because it seems like eventually the Gentiles will be fed. So I kind of like that little hint saying that the Gentiles will be taken care of. And here it is, as we said before, he's testing to see how she's going to respond, how the disciples and those around will respond. But she responded, "Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." And that's an interesting, Mark adds that detail, under the table. So it kind of shows the dog is now under the table getting the crumbs. And she doesn't challenge Jesus's priority. She's not screaming racist. She's not saying, well, what about us? Aren't we all equal, in God's eyes type of stuff? She's saying, hey, like a dog, we can go under the table and pick up some of the crumbs that fall to us too. And I think that just shows her humility. She wasn't an arrogant woman. Then he told her, because of this reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter. So unlike Matthew's great faith, Mark focuses on her specific response, which is, basically she just gets up and then goes once Jesus says, your daughter has been healed. And once again, I think this demonstrates Jesus' power, that he can just speak and demons are gone. And I think it is a testament to this woman. Then Mark just adds the little detail. When she got back home, she found her child lying on the bed and the demons were gone. So it kind of shows that this girl's resting peacefully. She's not in torments on the bed and she is recovered. And that is Mark's account. Anything you want to add before we go into our timeless truths and employments?
It's interesting how far Jesus will go to reach one person. In Mark chapter 3, in 7-8, it says, but Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the sea, and a great multitude from Galilee followed him, and from Judea and Jerusalem and Idumea and beyond Jordan, and those from Tyre and Sidon. A great multitude, when they heard how many things he was doing, came to him. They came to Jesus back at that point in Mark 3.
That was early.
That is, Jesus goes to her in this particular time. And I just find it interesting how he'll pick people out. He'll say, hey, Zacchaeus, you came looking for me. I'm looking for you. He does that. So he's always on, I call it the prowl. He's always looking for souls. He's always looking, and that's the nature of our God.
So with that thought, let's roll into these timeless truths. And we just have 3 of them. What does this passage teach us that is always true? And it's faith transcends all barriers. The Syrophoenician woman's faith overcame ethnic, social, and religious divides, showing that Jesus responds to faith, not status. So we just need to come in faith. 2, humility unlocks God's grace. So her willingness to accept crumbs reflects a humble heart that trusts in God's overflow of mercy. And in return, I hope it invites us to do the same. And then 3, Jesus honors great faith. Jesus praises her great faith, showing that bold trust in his power and goodness moves his heart, no matter who you are. And I think that's so important. Anything before employment points?
No, please, go ahead.
Okay. Now, this is for our listeners. You hear the timeless truths that apply at all times, and this is how we can take truths and apply them in our everyday lives. Trust Jesus beyond your status. We need to reject any feelings of being unworthy of going to God in prayer. We need to trust God's goodness, not your background or status. And that's what makes you welcome in his presence. So we need to stop thinking we have to do certain things or be so good to approach God, and just understand that we can approach him with any status. Now, approach God with humility. So examine where pride might block your prayers and ask for a humble heart. Like the woman, accept God's grace, even if it comes as crumbs. So a lot of times we'll have no status, but we can approach God with pride. So it's important to be like this woman, say, I'm a sinner, and just approach that way. And then 3, step out in faith. Are you a person who steps out in faith and takes risk? Be like this woman who understood the power of God and stepped out of her comfort zone to ask for Jesus' help. If she stayed home, her child would have had that demon still in there. So it was really that she stepped out in faith and salt. Any comments on that?
Love the timeless truths. It's what brings us all to life. It's not just a stale first century account in a Gentile region, but you look and faith transcends all barriers and you go trust Jesus beyond your status, approach God with humility, step out in faith. All those things are employment points that if we embrace, bring us like this lady into the presence of God, trusting for those crumbs to complete our ministry that he's called us to do. I just love how it just broadens this and just makes it relevant to us today. We don't make God's word relevant. We just show people the relevance.
So our closing thought is the Syrophoenician woman's faith broke through every barrier, cultural, religious, and social block to reach Jesus's heart. In Matthew 15 and Mark 7, Jesus shows that his grace is for all who trust him, no matter who they are. So her story should challenge us to persist in faith, embrace humility, and trust that God's mercy overflows to every corner of the earth. Also ask yourself, are you holding back, thinking you're too far outside for his reach? And we should all come to Jesus today, and he is willing to meet your faith with his grace. And that was podcast 69 in the Jesus Said That series, titled Seeking Crumbs of Grace, the Woman Who Had Nothing But Faith, covering Matthew 15 and Mark 7. All right. I think we did that in 30-some minutes. We've been having long hour ones.
We have been. We've had marathon podcasts, yes.
So what do you want to share with us that's interesting with...
In conjunction with our lesson today, we are to be those that make disciples of all nations. I think of even the VBS curriculum that you had written, and then when you shared the detail that out of everyone who's looked at that, there were 1,000 from, was it Iraq?
Iraq.
The most watched place. And I'm going, that's special that you're there. I was in contact with a pastor, Bible college president up in northern India the last couple of days. And he was telling me about how they get students and train people from Nepal. And I thought, we sent books to Nepal. And we have thousands of copies now that have gone out to those in India. But God just honors us when we have that cross-cultural heart. And your music does it. Your VBS material does it. Our podcasts do that. We're reaching out. The most watched country where we have the most viewership is that of India, which is just really interesting to me.
A lot of people.
Well, and then, 1.4 billion, I was just told just the other day. And you have Filipinos watching us, and that was there, and America's up, of course. But it's just, this is an exciting time. Jesus had to literally walk 40 miles in order to do and to reach one woman. And we do this kind of podcast, and we'll be in 50 countries. And we just thank God for that privilege to take and to do. But keep asking for those crumbs. People need what you can provide for them. And if you don't have the means to provide it, better yet, because when you find yourself totally destitute, faith wins the day.
So I've been thinking, and it's amazing how it does get out there, just these podcasts, those Bible studies. But I was watching some podcasts, and just a little different topic, and just some interesting things. Things you can't prove, but with angels, demons, just interesting stories you hear. Yeah. And I was listening, it was about, there was some, it sounds kind of dark, but surveys done on people in hospice. And they asked them to say, when they felt like they were dying, what they were experiencing. And it was interesting. All those who were Christians or perceived to be Christians, they either saw a loved one coming for them or angels coming for them. And I mean, obviously you can't prove any of this. Mm-hmm. But I just thought that was kind of interesting because it brought to mind the story with the rich man Lazarus, how the angels went together. But I guess my point is there's this whole angelic realm out there that we hear about the demons and angels, and we know so little about. And we don't really have any authority biblically to know what's true and what's not with some of this stuff. Obviously, you know, there's angels, there's demons, and so forth. But it just sometimes makes you wonder how much is going around us that we have just no clue. And even our own death experience, what are we going to experience? And it's just kind of one of those things that is, I don't want to say outside of theology, because it does have to do with God, but you can't, I mean, we won't know till we die.
Just a time with
and
that.
I'm not coming back.
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
right. Yeah.
And I do reject those stories of, you know, a little boy goes to heaven and he sees all these things and he comes back to, I don't think God is going to take your spirit, stick you in heaven, and then stick you back down if you die. Like, my bad. But just some of those things are interesting because they're recorded facts.
Exactly.
One of them, and then
I'll be curious
with you. It was a woman who was dying, and this is all, you know, recorded stuff. And she's dying, and right as she's dying, she says she sees her father, but then she's all confused because she sees her sister is with her father. And then it turns out that her sister had died a week before, and yet no one told her because they were afraid it would kill her. And it's just, you hear stuff like that, and you're like, I don't really know what to make of it. Because, you know, you can't put chapter, verse, or anything. But it's just one of those things that makes you think, you know, there's so much we don't know about the supernatural world. It's just interesting when you're reading these stories with demon possession and angels and guardian angels and all this stuff. That's like, you know, there's a whole world out there we don't really understand, which is just kind of interesting. I'm not making statements one way or another, you know, that, you know, it's gospel truth, but it's just interesting. But you were going to share something.
When were angels created and what was their purpose? Well, this morning we read Psalm 104. Any of us working through one of my devotion books, or you working through it in YouTube with schedule to go through the Bible in a year, Psalm 104. And Psalm 104 begins with God's creation of light. So that's day one. But then it talks about the angels, which is very interesting, and their role. And then the psalmist goes on to day 3 with the foundations of the earth and some of those things. So it seems possible when you think about the order of Psalm 104, take it with Job 38:7 about the morning, the sons of God singing the morning star at creation. They might have been created on day 2. So that's very interesting. But then tying in with what you were saying, what's their purpose? Hebrews 1:14, are they not ministering spirits sent forth to those who be heirs of salvation? And people always read heirs of salvation in a sense, oh, they'll bring us to God in salvation, you know, delivery from hell. But the context of Hebrews is dealing with the world to come, Hebrews 2:5. I think it's talking more about a millennial inheritance. But angels are there to serve us. And that's what's so amazing when you hear these stories and you're trying to figure out what's right and what's not.
You're fathoming,
They're there to serve us. We can't see them one day, but yet Paul says, 1 Corinthians, one day we'll judge angels. So I'm just glad you brought that up, especially with today's reading and thinking about that as well.
It's an interesting topic. And like I say, you can't really preach it from a pulpit because there's so little that we actually know. I mean, you have your Michael and, you know, you have the Prince of Persia and them fighting in Daniel. And then you have some stuff in Revelation, but, you know, the archangels. But it's very limited, you know, what we can know. So I think it's just an interesting thought. And it's a good reminder that there's a lot going on around us that we don't know without being, you know, there's a demon under every bush type of people. You know, that must be an angel or that must be a demon. You know, there's people like that. It's like, But I think there's so much we don't know in this life and that's why prayer is so important. And with all that said, I know a little bit off topic, but I've been enjoying our Bible devotions. So they've been going well. Except when my app didn't work right then one day and cut my streak.
Yeah. Mine did the same. I hate to say it. It came back. I don't understand that.
And it cut my streak, so I had to restart. But other than that, it's been good. And we'll see you guys next time.